going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be going over Child's Play from 1988. So let's get into that. Hi, my name is Leo, and if I talk about the movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, you are in the right place. And like I said, today we are going over Child's Play from 1988. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Now, I have been a little behind on the spooky season videos, but this year I really wanted to go ahead and run through the Child's Play franchise, as it is my favorite horror franchise of all time, and it also spans one of my favorite horror icons of all time within Chucky. As I just mentioned, Chucky is my favorite horror icon. If you guys have been following me for a little while now, for at least the last good year, you would know that that is the case. I have as many Chucky products as I can possibly get when it comes to any of the action figures, clothing, the Magic the Gathering Chucky set that just came out like a year ago. I have as much Chucky stuff as I possibly can get, besides the doll itself, which that is still something I have added to my collection. But we're here to talk about the original Child's Play, a very, very beloved movie in the horror community, a beloved movie of my own. Now, I wouldn't say it's in my top 50. Maybe after this watch, it would be in my top 50 horror movies of all time, because there is certain things about this movie that kind of brings it below all the other ones in this franchise that I still hold up to be the best of this franchise. But overall, this is a horror movie that I absolutely love, and it spawned a character within Chucky, which is one of my favorite slashers, favorite horror icons of all time. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into my pros. Let's start with my pros. This is just such a great and unique concept where you have a serial killer within Charles Lee Ray, who finally, after many years and murders, has finally gotten technically captured and killed in the opening sequence, but he is able to transfer his soul into this good guy doll, and it ends up being in this Barkley family because of Andy's birthday. His mom gets him the doll, and little by little we start to figure out that Charles Lee Ray is the one possessing this doll. And all these things kind of come from that. And one mostly being the paranoia of what is kind of going on here, where you have a young boy who is being basically manipulated by this doll or by Charles Lee Ray, and telling him to keep it secret and trying to still murder people while still trying to figure out what he's going to do with his soul. How is he going to get out of the situation? How is he going to transfer his soul to an actual human? All these different things, while you have a parent who is having to deal with a son who seems to be going through a mental breakdown and starting to go a little crazy, because now she's thinking in her head, is my son really a murderer? And you have the police really trying to narrow down who is the killer here, and they're all pointing fingers at Andy, this 6-year-old boy. You know, how would you think someone like this could do murder or killing his aunt or whatever the case may be? But no one believes him, because his only story, his only outlet that he has is that, hey, it's Chucky. Chucky is the one doing all these killings. But who is going to believe a 6-year-old boy saying that a doll is the one doing the killings? And it just really adds to that paranoia. It really adds to that parent element where the mom really wants to believe her son, but it just sounds too crazy to be true. So she's trying to kind of do her own detective work, and she starts to peel back the pieces, and you start to finally get that revelation for the mother as well, that Chucky is the one causing all this mayhem. And that is one of the best reveals in horror, in my opinion, as well, of her realizing what Chucky is. And it just adds all these very fun elements, all these very horrifying elements. I think this movie is, without a doubt, out of all of them, probably the most like horror movie out of this franchise, where you do have a lot of those like POVs, kind of silent stalker, kind of maneuvering through the shadows, killing one by one as he pleases. You know, a lot of POV shots with a very ill intent. You know, there's very little moments of that Chucky humor that we've all kind of gone to know because of the rest of the movies. This is where it was kind of his most grounded per se, where he is really just like that silent stalker, that silent killer. We don't really get too much dialogue out of him until way later in the second half of the movie. So you don't get all those like funny one-liners from Chucky that we get in the rest of the franchise either. So it ends up being one of the more horror-y type of movie in this franchise, where you do again have that paranoia, and there's kind of that tension always going on of what is he going to do next. So it's a very, very fun movie for that aspect of it. There is some cons to that kind of template, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, I think this just uh, really shows the horror side of Chucky. I feel like a lot of people forget Chucky when he comes to the conversations of like who is the best horror icon. And I think that has to do a lot with the newer movies and as well as the show, where he ends up being more of a comedic character than a horrifying character. And seeing this first movie, you can definitely tell why he was in that mix of best horror icon in the first place. And I think performances across the board were done very, very well, especially a standout with Andy. You know, he does have that very like shy kind of attitude that kids would have, that seemingly a kid that doesn't really have any friends at school, seems to be kind of a loner. He does kind of have that shy attitude to him. But I think overall, especially towards the end, when you start seeing his kind of panic as well, of him kind of realizing that Chucky is coming back to try to kill him, I think for a child actor, he does very, very well. So I very much enjoyed him as a child actor in this movie. And they also have his mother as well. You can definitely tell that she's super caring towards Andy. You can definitely tell that she's worried of what's going to happen to him. She's trying to believe him, but she doesn't know how because there's not a clear explanation of what's going on. And then just all the other side characters around. Like, of course, we also have like the main detective here, who I think is a good addition to this movie as well. So I think performances across the board were done very, very well. The look of Chucky as well, I think, is very great. Probably one of the best looks of this doll. The way they did kind of the animatronics, and also the way I'm sure they put like another kid or someone who has a little bit smaller statue in a suit. You can definitely tell those moments, but I think they look very, very well. They don't look out of place when it comes to all the other effects in this movie. I think just the suit costume design, the animatronics of Chucky itself looks very, very well. And it just again adds to that, where you don't see a doll who is very robotic. He's for the most part pretty fluid, so you can definitely convince yourself that it's a person possessing the doll and not just like a robot doll that's trying to kill him like you would like in a Five Nights at Freddy's or something like that. And also you have just a great conclusion to the story as well, where more and more people start to see what is truly going on, and it leaves the ending kind of ambiguous, which we obviously know now it's spawned a whole franchise, so it's not really that ambiguous when you see it now if you've never seen the movie before. But you kind of do have that ambiguous ending where you don't know if Chucky really is dead or if he figured out another way to get out of this situation. And you have one of the best kind of ending lines as well, in my opinion, where the main detective tells his partner, "Hey, do you believe me now?" And he goes, "Yeah, but who's gonna believe me?" And I feel like that kind of puts like the nail in the coffin of this whole kind of story that they're telling of paranoia and believing others and hearing the craziest situation possible. And how is that even the truth? But when you really uncover all the facts, you see what the truth is, and that paranoia was real the entire time. But it's hard to explain it to anybody because it's such a crazy idea, such a crazy situation, that who is ever going to believe you that this actually happened? And that is just a great finishing line, a great finishing dialogue from those characters right at the end to kind of again just put that nail in the coffin. So this movie is just, for me, overall almost perfect. There's some things that we'll talk about, of course, but again, it's an almost perfect horror movie for me. It spawns one of the best horror icons in my opinion, and one of the best horror feuds between Andy and Chucky itself. And then, you know, you have Brad Dourif here as well, which I've rarely mentioned him in this review, but Brad Dourif, one of the most iconic horror voices. That Chucky voice is so iconic. That Chucky laugh is so iconic. And even at the beginning, when he is in his Charles Lee Ray form, his human form, great performance there as well, when he's doing the whole Damballa chant as well at the beginning. So Brad Dourif, another just extreme standout when it comes to just the voice itself. You know, most of the expressions come from the doll and the animatronics, but just the voice itself is such an iconic voice from Brad Dourif. So there's so many things I can say good about this movie. If you've never seen the Child's Play franchise, absolutely check it out. It is one of the best horror movies of all time. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my cons, and there's very few cons here. One is that this movie is kind of a proof of concept of the Chucky character, where you do have a much slower storytelling of of just this kind of reveal of Chucky, where you get a lot of POVs, you get a lot of him lurking in the shadows, you get a lot of still shots of him just in the Chucky body, not really saying anything. So it's kind of a proof of concept for his character, because as we see throughout the rest of the franchise, he is a lot more lively, gives a lot more great one-liners, a lot more of a comedic horror villain. And this is kind of their starting point for this character, of course, and you get little glimpses of what the Child's Play or the Chucky character is going to kind of end up being. With, you know, you get a few one-liners towards the end of this movie that kind of do have that comedic relief, but again, they didn't know what they had yet when they first made this movie. It's a lot more kind of concealed when it comes to what the Chucky character is and what he ends up being in the future. So because of those aspects, this movie can feel a little slow at times, because you don't get that constant Chucky-ness that comes out of the rest of the franchise. Kind of building off of that, again, it is a little bit more slower pace, especially even towards the end when you get that final like kind of confrontation or battle with Chucky. It does have a little bit of redundancy when it comes to, you know, is Chucky dead? Is Chucky not dead? Them trying to run around in circles in their own small little apartment complex. It becomes a little redundant and a little kind of comedic when you start seeing them just running back and forth between two different doors, or running around the kitchen into the living room, into the kitchen, into the living room, just trying to escape Chucky. So it is kind of comedic in that way, but it does become a little redundant, and it comes to the point where you're watching and you're like, oh, come on, either kill them or kill Chucky, one or the other. We can speed this up a little bit. So it does have a little bit of that slower pace, and even when it comes to the final battle, you are kind of antsy and trying to resolve this issue as quickly as possible. But overall, still a great movie. But that is going to be it for this one, guys. Let me know what you guys think about Child's Play in the comment section down below. Let me know where you guys hold Chucky in amongst all the other horror icons that are out there. Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts about that in the comment section down below. But again, if you guys like talking about the movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.